She will be speaking on the topic open source and AI. And the second keynote speaker is Ms. Rebecca McKinnon. She will be speaking on the topic free speech and AI in the era of global uncertainty and information warfare. Without further ado, since we have two speakers on our list, I welcome Ms. Nithya Roof. Nithya has been the director at large on Linux Foundation board for the last 5 years, and in 2019 was elected chair of influential Linux Foundation board. She works actively to advance the mission of Linux Foundation around building sustainable ecosystems that are built on open collaboration. She's a passionate advocate and a speaker for opening doors to new and diverse people in technology and can often seen speaking and writing on this topic. Over to you, Ms. Nithya.
Thank you so much, Angela. And it's really wonderful to be with all of you. Mishi Chowdhury is a good friend of mine, and thank you to Mishi for recommending that I join you all to share this topic with you. So today I'm speaking as the chairwoman of the Linux Foundation Board of Directors. The other hat I wear in my day job is I'm a director of the Open Source Program Office at Amazon. But today, all of my views and talk will be really based on my Linux Foundation viewpoints and board role. With that in mind, I want to talk about why it is so important that open source and open standards play a role in AI. Let me start by saying thank you so much to the Software Freedom Law Center for the topics that they suggested, and I'm going to do my best to cover most of these topics. The first one I want to start with is to acknowledge the fact that in these 30 some years, open source has become now the default way we develop software. This is how modern software development works. Most companies, most organizations use between 70 and 90% of their the stack, software stack, is open source, and really only 30% is custom code. And that custom code is to really build everything together and maybe to provide some user experience and some unique functionality that they are good at building. But most companies have come to accept that they don't have to create the entire stack, and open source is really there in all spheres of industry in order to use and to build. Now, when you look at the value of open source, Harvard Business School rather, did a research project under the leadership of Frank Nagel, and they actually valued the open source software from a demand side from companies and organizations that use it, and they said it's valued at $9 trillion. What does that mean? It means that if organizations were to recreate the software themselves or build all of this software themselves, it would, they have to spend at least $9 trillion to create all of that software. And that is the savings that organizations experience by using open source software. But more importantly, it's the speed of innovation, the collaboration that open source software brings to the table. But when you look at AI, on the other hand, AI clearly has been in development for decades, but everything really came together in the last 3 years where AI could actually be used by consumers. And one of the big AI platforms that came out a few years ago was ChatGPT. And suddenly, the power of AI was unleashed to consumers, and we could actually start asking questions and kind of discovering how much more useful a very natural language interaction with a computer can be. But predominantly AI, when it came out in the last 3 years and since then, has been proprietary. Whether it's ChatGPT, Gemini, even Llama, has a lot of proprietary restrictions on its use. And you have to wonder, why was it predominantly proprietary in an age when open source is so widely available. A couple of reasons. One was the cost of training, the cost of inference. You need a lot of hardware, and you need very expensive hardware, and there are limited supplies of that hardware, and that created some restrictions on research and open source and others being able to use and create, open source models, if you will. And the second reason was a lot of proprietary companies, including OpenAI, started out with the premise that this is a very unique and a challenging technology, and it needs to be restricted. It needs to be regulated. It cannot get into the hands of certain people. It can be used, badly or in malicious ways. And so they kind of created that narrative, if you will, to restrict AI into the hands of a few people. But all that changed earlier this year, I think about the end of January, when DeepSeek came out, and people said it blew their minds because DeepSeek was being created with very open source collaborative ways. It built on work of others. It also tried to, the early versions of it, tried to create more open licenses, share more openly, make it more accessible. And it was trained with less hardware and in a very constrained way. DeepSeek, because of the constraints that it faced, lack of access to hardware, it was forced to be more innovative, more creative, use open source type of collaborative methods to train it and deliver functionality that was and performance that was as good as some of the proprietary models. So that really blew people's mind. And you find that even OpenAI starts saying, I think maybe we need to develop an open source strategy. It's not real that we should not, play in open source. Then you hear, and Meta has for a long time said open source is the way forward, and they have been good about opening PyTorch and GraphQL and React, and a lot of great components have come out of Meta, and they continue to want to move in an open source direction, which is a good thing. And then you find other leaders like Kai-Fu Lee saying, I think, open source is the winner in AI, and we need to be more open source forward in AI. Now, why is it that open source is so important to AI, and especially now? There really are four main reasons. One is the global AI race is definitely accelerating. Nations are trying to compete to become dominant in AI, or at least have a presence in AI. Partly it's because language and culture with more friction. It restricts you to using something that's a black box that you don't know what it was trained on, and that may not be aligned with your values and your culture. And open source models offer an alternative, right? Because you can customize it, you can fine tune it, you can maybe redevelop it. And so I think open source models are being sought after from a training perspective so that it reflects the culture and values of countries around the world. And more regulations require more transparency, more trust because of security, because of bias, because of trustworthiness. And openness allows you to create more trustworthy systems because you can actually inspect what is in the code, how it was trained, etc. And innovation in the AI space has been happening for a long time with open source, whether it's Jupyter notebooks or PyTorch or TensorFlow and lots of AI tools. There's a lot of breakthroughs that have been consistently happening, and the flywheel of open source creates faster and faster innovation. And I think it's important that it if AI were to grow faster, we need open source to be a key participant in AI. And the last thing I would say is the regulations, whether it's the AI Act or executive orders, etc., are really creating a shift towards openness. And organizations are asking for standards and licenses and frameworks to be more and more open so that more people can use it. It can be more transparent and trustworthy. I'll say it in another way. AI is not a toy anymore. It's not just this little toy where you ask questions and say, hey, what's the weather like today? Or which place should I visit when I visit New Delhi and things like that. It actually impacts people's lives, careers, financial services, healthcare, education, how we are educating our kids. And so we really want models that are open and reflect values, reflect the language, data that we care about across the world. And models are not just technology anymore, they're culture, they're culture infrastructure. And nations want to own model creation more and more because of the impact on their citizens and their culture. There's a real fear that languages can be shut out or culture can be shut out if they are only trained in certain places or using certain data. So there's widespread investment going on, and there's a terminology being called a sovereign AI, where countries can actually create models that reflect, who they are. And without open source, it's very difficult to accomplish what countries want to do in terms of creating more friendly models that reflect their culture and values. Open source brings that to the table. It's through transparency, we create more trust, ability to fine tune it, ability to add your own data, ability to add your own values to open source, inspection of bias, and more eyes on issues and security. There's widespread collaboration in open source, which means it's more accessible, and the flywheel of innovation where it can, move really fast because so many people are involved and so many people are extending it and transferring it. And frankly, historically, open source has always reduced the cost curve and taken it down so that more and more people can use it. I know I'm running out of time, so I'm going to try to go fast in terms of a couple of things. There are challenges in open source, and open source needs to get certain things right. There's no consistent definition of what open means. What are all the components that need to be open in order for something to be called open? Yes, OSI has been working on it, Linux Foundation's been working on it, but we still haven't come to a conclusion on what it means. And so, in the absence of a definition, a lot of organizations who release are calling themselves open, even when they are not completely open. Um, yes, weights could be open, but so many other components are not released. And so, it's important that all of these components are open in order to be able to recreate a model or to be able to fine tune something. So I'm going to go by this quickly. I just wanted to point out that a lot of licenses on the right-hand side that say they're open are not quite completely open. They do have some restrictions. And so the reason why it's been harder to add licenses to AI and also to say what is OpenAI is because it's not software. It has a lot more components. In software, it was pretty straightforward. You had software, you had documentation, libraries, and tools, and you could assign an open source license to it. But AI has a number of components. It has code, which we understand, then it has data, and then it has documentation. And so you really need a lot of different kinds of licenses to classify this as open. And also, you need maybe all of these components to be open in order to, say, recreate a model. But maybe you only need some of them to be open if you want to fine tune a model. So, one of the things that the Linux Foundation has been working on is something called the Model Openness Framework, where they are trying to list everything as, all of the elements of a model, and then to say what are the classifications and what are the licenses that should be used for those components in order for it to be open. So that there's transparency for researchers, for developers, for companies to know what they're using, what they have access to, what they can do with it. Today, without that, there's a lot of confusion and there's a lot of misunderstanding of whether a model is open or not. And there's also a move to create more open standards in AI for protocols like MCP, the Model Context Protocol, or the Agent Communication Protocol. And the LF is working on creating more standards in this space as well. And the last thing that they're working on is an open license for AI so that the nature of AI can be licensed if you cannot use a software license. So I'd encourage you to check out the OpenMDW, which is a license, open license for models. It's a permissive open model license. And to date, we have not had an open license like this for models. And so this is an opportunity to try it. Once it's used by some models, it can then be submitted to the OSI for approval by the OSI as an open source license. So this call to action really came from the LF, and I'm going to share it as is. One of the call to actions the LF has been making is to encourage people to use more open source licenses for AI tools and libraries, and not to create, custom licenses or restrictive licenses. And for models themselves to use more permissive licenses like the OpenMDW, encouraging more global cooperation in an age where we are seeing a lot of silos across the world. How do we resist as an open source community and create more global collaboration? And policies have been very redundant and very narrow, each country, announcing their own regulations. And we are saying we need more innovation friendly AI policies, not overregulation, not duplication, not segmentation of regulation, and open standards so that we can have more AI interoperability. So all of us really can build more responsible, trustworthy AI systems. And let's move from open source AI just having one moment, during DeepSeek, to open source AI becoming kind of the default, the norm, like open source software is today from a development perspective. So with that, I'm going to stop and pass it back to Angela and check out the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Nitya. That was very informative. Let's look at the questions quickly. There's one question. It's from Bahadur Shah. So I just wanted to address a controversy regarding open source AI. Unlike usual open source software, a lot of values lie in the underlying data which we use to train the model. Without the data itself being open source and accessible, aren't so-called open source AI like Llama and DeepSeek still locked from the public?
Bahadur is right. That's one of the challenges with Llama and with DeepSeek is that data is locked. We cannot examine it, and so we don't know what it was trained on. We don't know, what biases and areas it has concerns with. Data is a challenging area because a lot of data is copyrighted, and so sometimes model creators cannot share their data. So there's a lot of work going on to see how synthetic data may be introduced, maybe, or other types of data can be made open, and more public data sets can be created that can be shared. He's absolutely right. Without being able to see the data, you don't know how it was trained, and hence what inferences it can come to.
One question from my end, actually, since you mentioned definitions. So we know that the OSI definition exists. Do you think that covers all the requirements open source AI would need, or do you think there should be some? What are your thoughts on that definition, and what do you think an ideal definition would cover?
That's a great question. I think the OSI definition seems to fall somewhere in the middle. It is not quite completely open. From a data perspective, I think many critics have said that the data could be more open. It does not allow for that. But they were trying to kind of find a middle ground between everything being fully open and everything being fully closed and being practical. But it didn't really satisfy commercial interest nor, open source interests. So they're still working on, I think, fine tuning it. The other challenge is having just one definition in my mind may not fit. I like what the Linux Foundation's approach is, which is that there are three classifications: open science, where everything is open, an open model, where certain data sets are not open, and there's, I think, one more definition. With that, you can say if you want to recreate a model, say for research or as a scientist, the open science approach will give you that access to everything. And then if you're a company who wants to allow fine tuning, but then you don't want, you are not able to release all the data, you still have another classification. So my opinion is you need more than one definition to suit different use cases. One definition may not suit all the use cases.
That sounds fair to me also. Okay. Moving on, we have another question. This is on based on your experiences, what should we keep in mind to make open source AI more inclusive and ethical, especially for countries in the global south?
That's a great question, and frankly, one of the concerns with AI, if it is very restricted to only certain countries and certain areas where it's trained, is that the global south culture, languages, values, ethics, will be not represented in the way that can happen is if we have more open science type of models, right, which make data available, which allow you to train and create models that represent the culture and values of the global south.
Thanks for that, Nitya. The next question we have is, what changes in different laws, i.e., copyright, patent, are needed to actually implement open source license? Being a
I
lawyer might be a tough question for me.
Yeah, but you should answer that, Angela. I'm not a lawyer, and I all I know is that uh, copyright is creating restrictions on data, and AI is a different beast altogether, and we need a different lens to look at data as well as models from a legal perspective. But you all are experts in this space, and if you could comment.
I think I'll move on to the next question. Because okay, so we have one
Nitya,
more.
nobody's going to like us if we actually told them what we would like. We would like them to stick to law, which nobody wants to. Right now, they're hell bent on destroying law because it doesn't work for their business model.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Mishi.
Thank you, Mishi. So we have one final question. This is how can open source AI work on attribution? Do you think open source AI should be crediting all the data and contributors of those data as well? If yes, don't you think it could make the license and attribution complex, or is there any simpler way?
I think it should attribute, people who are contributing the information, and perhaps there can be a simpler way to do it. I mean, over years, we have come to some really good models in open source software. Where we are preserving and respecting the contributions of people who came before us, right? And so, even though there are many, many, many dependencies in software, we often acknowledge and respect all of those authors who wrote that software. So there has to be. I think we need to find a way to do it in a simpler way and find attribution for the sources of the data.
Those are all the questions, I guess. If there's any question from anyone, feel free to paste it on the chat so we can pick it up later or personally as well. Thank you so much, Nitya, for spending your time with us today and speaking on this important topic.
Thank you.
Thank you. So now we'll be moving to our next keynote for the day. We have with us Miss Rebecca McKinnon for the second keynote, which is on the topic free speech and AI in the era of global uncertainty and information warfare. Miss Rebecca, are you there? Hi.
Hello,
Hello.
can you hear me and see me?
Yes, we can.
Fantastic.
All right. I'll just get into your introduction and you can take it from there. Sure. Ms. Rebecca McKinnon is Vice President Global Advocacy at the Wikimedia Foundation, which is Wikipedia's nonprofit host. She is the author of Consent of the Network, the Worldwide Struggle for Internet Freedom. She is also the co-founder of Citizen Media Network Global Voices and founding director of Ranking Digital Rights. From 1998 to 2004, she was CNN's bureau chief and correspondent in Beijing and Tokyo. She has taught at the University of Hong Kong and University of Pennsylvania and held fellowships at Harvard, Princeton, and the University of California. She holds a AB Magna Cum Laude in government from Harvard and was Fulbright Scholar in Taiwan. Over to you, Ms. Rebecca.
Well, thank you so much, Angela. Please let me know if my audio is okay. And yeah, it's an honor to be here. Like Nitya, I'm a big fan of Mishi Chowdhury, who I see is on. I heard her speaking just a little bit ago. So hello and hi everyone. I didn't bring slides today. I thought I would just talk for 15, 20 minutes and we can have a bit of a discussion. So my mandate here is to talk about the future of free speech in an AI driven world and where we are going. Just to preface my remarks, I work for the Wikimedia Foundation, as Angela mentioned. We are the nonprofit organization that serves as technical, legal, and financial host for Wikipedia and other global volunteer-run free knowledge projects. Our job primarily is to provide, maintain, and defend the technology that enables people to share well-sourced knowledge in over 300 languages across borders for educational knowledge sharing purposes. And also to defend the right of people to self-govern in creating and maintaining free knowledge projects around the world. And so I lead the advocacy team and lead the advocacy strategy for the foundation, and that helps to defend the right and protect the right of people to edit and share free knowledge across the world. So Wikipedia's relationship to AI, I'm coming to realize, serves as a very useful case study for the future of free speech in the age of AI. In a number of ways. One thing that we are finding as we are working to defend and advance the principles of free knowledge across the world in the age of AI, we're learning that while AI might change the information landscape in many ways, and I'll talk a little bit about Wikipedia's relationship to that landscape, AI has not changed the fundamental human rights principles and the need to protect and defend freedom of expression and privacy, which is a necessary condition for freedom of expression. In fact, AI only makes it all the more important and urgent that free expression and privacy and human rights in general be protected and respected, and that is something we cannot be distracted from as we think about AI regulation and business models and all of the rest of it that much of the debate is surrounding. Just as Nietzsche was talking about how open source is and the meaning of open and the meaning of open source are subject to some debate, we're also seeing a lot of debate around what free speech and freedom mean, and some confusion around that. What does free speech actually mean in the context of human rights, in the context of our shared vision? And I assume that all of us here share the same vision of a world where everyone, regardless of geographical or any other background, gets a chance to thrive. And freedom and free speech in that context is not a free-for-all, right? If you have no rules whatsoever to protect the rights of everyone, then only the strongest, the richest, those with control of the means of violence actually get to speak. So you do not have free speech for anyone else, right? Which is why we have governance, which is why governance based on human rights norms is desirable, and whether that is governance of a physical community or whether it's governance of a platform like Wikipedia, right? It is not a free for all. Over the past nearly half century, Wikipedia's editors have developed very clear rules for what constitutes reliably sourced encyclopedic educational content and what does not. There is a purpose to the community and governance around that purpose, and content that does not meet the standards of reliably sourced encyclopedic educational content is deleted from Wikipedia by the community of editors and people who've been elected from the community with authority to enforce the rules. And they do this not perfectly, but to the best of their ability in good faith. And so that is the right of the community to set and enforce these rules in keeping with common values around the human rights of everyone involved in this enterprise is central to Wikipedia's purpose. Now, what does this have to do with AI? Well, as it so happens, over the past several years, as large language models have evolved, we are now finding that basically all large language models are using Wikipedia and content from other Wikimedia projects like Wikidata, Wikisource, etc. That Wikimedia projects are a major source of training data for all large language models. So that is one way in which Wikipedia has a very symbiotic relationship with the evolution of AI. Now, there was a conversation in the last session about attribution and some of the challenges around that. This is, of course, key for Wikipedia and the other Wikimedia projects is as large language models are using content from Wikipedia or content from independent journalism or, open data sets of different kinds, is that content being attributed to its source? And to us, that is not only important from the standpoint of our editor community getting credit for their work and understanding how the knowledge that they are sharing on the projects is being used elsewhere, and getting and having an understanding of their impact as it moves through the world. But it's also in the public interest for users of LLMs to know where the content is coming from and to be able to understand and interrogate whether the information they're getting from an LLM is reliable or not, what sources it's drawing upon, not only from Wikipedia, but of course, what sources were cited to get that information. So the provenance of the information, as well as attribution, is going to be a really important problem to solve as we think about how will citizens of nations and of the world be able to form opinions based on facts in order to make informed decisions about their lives. Which brings me to another aspect of freedom of expression. Article 19 of the International Declaration of Human Rights, and as well as the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, doesn't just talk about freedom of expression to speak, but also to form opinions. So in Article 19, it says, everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression. This includes freedom to hold opinions without interference. you can't form and hold opinions without interference. If you're being targeted by disinformation campaigns and information warfare and being denied the right to even understand where the information is coming from and have choice in finding different sources of information and determining what is true and what is false. So your right to freedom of expression is very much intertwined with information integrity. Disinformation campaigns, information warfare are therefore a violation of freedom of expression. This is also something that I think gets lost in the discourse on freedom of speech and expression. The notion of freedom of speech is often weaponized by extremists to mean that they can say anything they want, and anyone who is contradicting them is somehow censoring them. So I think it's important to be asking in these debates: is the audience, is the public being afforded the opportunity to actually interrogate facts, to actually debate what is true and what is not? Or are the richest and the most powerful drowning out other voices and using technical and legal tools to do so? That is obviously not freedom of expression. And so, coming back to AI and large language models, of course, we have a problem where if we do not have attribution and provenance, then disinformation campaigns are given a leg up, given a big boost. It becomes much easier to swamp the ecosystem with AI slop, with propaganda, with information warfare, and the public not being able to see the difference. So this is one reason why attribution is very important. Bringing us back to human rights of human beings as well. One thing that the Wikimedia Foundation, in our work supporting volunteers, that we have observed over the past number of years now, is that as Wikipedia becomes integrated into more and more, not only LLMs, but voice assistants and search and everything else, governments and other powerful entities, including businesses, politicians, have more and more interest in what is appearing about them on Wikipedia and are deploying more and more tools at their disposal to try and influence the content appearing on Wikipedia, which includes threatening volunteers. So that means that the right to privacy, the right to anonymity, becomes absolutely essential in protecting and defending the right of communities to share knowledge, to govern what knowledge means to them, and without those protections, they have no freedom of speech. So that's another very important aspect. And if, of course, communities are not able to defend the integrity of the content they are sharing because they've been intimidated or driven offline, then the products of LLMs will become even more full of disinformation and propaganda. So, which brings me back again to the Wikimedia Foundation's strategy around AI, which is very much that humans need to be in control. our engineers, our machine learning and artificial intelligence teams in the product and tech department. I myself am as you know, an advocate and a political science person. I am not and a journalist. I'm not an engineer, so we'll have to send any technical questions to my other colleagues at another time. But the point being that the AI tools that the foundation is working with our communities to develop are meant to assist human editors in defending and improving the quality and integrity of content on Wikipedia. So that includes things like translation tools that help editors identify and replace or improve poor quality content that lacks reliable citations, particularly around scientific medical information and so on, while also helping editors use translation tools to translate not just from English into a less global language, but from regional languages, indigenous languages, into the larger global languages to get facts about what is happening in particular communities out into the world as well. Also, AI tools are used to help editors identify not only spam but behavior patterns that indicate some kind of campaign, poorly attributed sources, biased content, and so on. So again, all these tools are being developed in conjunction with communities for their use in improving the content, to helping to strengthen facts, strengthen attribution in multiple languages across geographies. Which then brings me just to a final point, and I look forward to the discussion, which relates to policy and regulation and where we're going. A couple of points here. One is that we see a lot of regulation that focuses on the various bad things that can come out of AI, and sure, there are many. We've been speaking about some of them, but we also need to have a vision of the world we want and how regulation is going to help support and strengthen communities' ability to defend their rights to freedom of expression, to improve information integrity. So when we're thinking about regulation of whether it's of platforms, internet platforms, whether it's of the deployment of AI, it's important that we work with policymakers to make distinctions between what many, I think, in our community might call surveillance capitalism, where the business model is seeking to maximize revenue around attention of audiences, versus non-commercial digital public goods, public interest projects created and governed by communities to serve a common good. We need to make sure that the purpose and business model and of different projects and platforms is understood and treated differently by regulators. And we're seeing that in many countries, those distinctions are not being made. For example, I was just in a conversation about the UK, something called the Online Safety Act, which unlike the Digital Services Act in the EU, does not differentiate in its requirements between different types of business models. And if it's implemented without sufficient care, there could be rather negative consequences for both the privacy, but also the autonomy and self-governance of editor communities. So we do need to have smarter regulations. My own team likes to talk about what we call the Wikipedia test. If a regulation that is proposed would make it harder for Wikipedia to thrive, then it's probably bad for a lot of public interest, community governed projects online. We need to make sure that as we're thinking about bad negative behaviors and harms that we want to punish and constrain, hold accountable, we're also ensuring that positive, diverse communities that are able to represent their own perspectives, their own truths, are able to thrive online and work together across national borders as well. So those are my sort of comments here. And I see there's a few questions in the chat, so happy to open up.
Thanks, Rebecca. So we can look at the questions right now. So we have one question. This says, hello, Rebecca. We are seeing a rise in cross-border censorship where governments pressure platforms to remove content under the disguise of fake news or national security. How can companies and civil society push back against this erosion of global free speech norms? This is particularly relevant. I think here we have also been seeing instances where real content is being termed as AI generated content and then getting under the issue of takedown. So what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, this is we are in a really tricky time right now because we have a situation now where a decreasing number of governments are showing an interest in championing international human rights standards for free speech. I think it's very important for this movement to work with the UN special rapporteurs, UN human rights bodies, really point to global standards on freedom of expression, on human rights, and to insist that these rights are vital to be preserved, and make the case with allies in our national political contexts that without protection of these rights, our own communities will not ultimately be heard globally either, right? That everyone's going to basically get washed out. That ultimately it's like sustainability of the environment. You need some fundamental universal principles to be defended. But this is a hard, we're in a bit of a winter right now in fighting for free speech. Yet at the same time, we are in a pivotal moment, right? So those of us who are in a position to challenge government demands need to do so. This is why the Wikimedia Foundation is, we recognize that unfortunately a lot of commercial platforms are not doing much to challenge demands in many contexts, and it's all the more important that we do everything we can in the courts around the world to push back against the erosion. But we need to think about how, as a global community, we can work in solidarity, how we can make the case at the international level on how free speech norms, free speech standards, human rights standards are critical to sustainable development. How just as with climate, if we don't address climate, people are going to suffer. If we don't address human rights, communities are not going to thrive.
That's true.
And it's, I think this is a real time for solidarity in getting those messages across to all of the stakeholders who we think can exercise some influence. And it's going to take, a lot of strategy and time. This is not, I've been working in free speech for 20 years, and I think, it's 3 steps forwards, 5 steps backwards, 6 steps sideways, but we can do this. We have to keep trying.
Mishi, I think your hand has been raised. Did you have to add anything here?
Sure. Thanks, Rebecca. Not only Rebecca's big fan, but I think the world is a big fan of Wikipedia, without which none of these fancy Gen AI models would exist. I'm just curious about the fact, about how's the foundation using these AI tools, and how, considering you have such a great licensing structure for the content, how does Foundation think about future and use of all it's the plugins, etc. You all have made sure that those hallucinations can be checked. And because Wikipedia is the only place where we can all still rely, we'd love to know about how the Foundation is thinking about those interactions.
Yeah, so what I might do in the chat is I might post a link to our AI strategy, which, sorry, I'm just searching it for it here. And I am not, an engineer, so there's definitely, I encourage you to bring in our engineers to talk about the more technical side of things. But in a nutshell, in developing AI tools, it's very much in conjunction with our editor communities, right? So some of the greatest amount of energy and usage is just around translation, because we do see that while there are plenty of problems in the English language ecosystem, the problems with disinformation and capture get even worse in languages that are spoken by fewer people in more limited geographical footprints. And so the translation is key, helping editors identify more reliable sources, but also just automating tasks that that are time consuming, so people can spend more time on the tasks that require greater thought in terms of ensuring reliable sources, determining whether a source is reliable, etc. Helping to onboard new editors more quickly too, because the quality also depends on making sure we have a thriving and large editor community. But in terms of attribution, this is a challenge that, and I think in the previous session there was some discussion of it's not a problem that has been fully solved in terms of how content gets attributed by LLMs, how the provenance of content gets tracked, because this is an absolutely critical thing, both for the future of Wikipedia, as well as for the public interest and the future of information integrity online. And I think there are a number of technical problems that have just not been solved. These are not problems that the foundation can solve by itself. This is kind of an effort that's going to require partnership with some of the LLM companies that have an interest in doing this right, along with open source communities and others. So this is this is one of the biggest challenges I think right now, and a lot of other projects and institutions that produce open research, open data, and so on also have a similar interest in this being gotten right.
Thanks, Rebecca, for that. I think there's one question which I think is slightly connected to this. So this is there any way to help spot instances of AI disinformation and manipulation on Wikipedia? Will there be any enhanced editorial requirements which Wikipedia plans to bring?
Yeah, so editorial requirements, of course, are the province of our volunteers, and different language wikis are kind of setting slightly different rules about the extent to which AI people are allowed to draft things with AI before they kind of improve it. After having done a rough draft, and those debates are ongoing in the community and are all kind of open on Wiki happening. The foundation is working with editors to help spot disinformation and manipulation on Wikipedia through pattern recognition by using automated tools to identify these trends. Generally, there's a combination of technical tools and just people noticing trends, and also oftentimes Wikipedia is not the first place where a trend starts. It tends to happen somewhere else that's easier to manipulate first, and then it kind of migrates to Wikipedia. Then people try to attack Wikipedia. Which is why we are working to strengthen a lot of research partnerships with disinformation researchers that track all sorts of trends across different parts of the internet, different social media sites, Reddit, etc. Kind of what are the trends, what are the memes, what are the talking points that we're seeing elsewhere, and helping the editors, helping to raise awareness amongst the editors of disinformation trends off Wiki so that they can spot them on Wiki and then use the technical tools available to catch things faster.
Thanks for that, Rebecca. That makes sense. So we're kind of out of time, but we still have one final question. This is sort of what you have touched base already. However, I'll just read it out. How do we balance the right to free expression with the urgent need to tackle AI-generated falsehood, especially during election or conflicts? There's a follow-up question. Is this possible without constitutional amendment for the judiciary and election officials to hold secret during both elections and conflicts?
Yeah, I don't know about constitutional amendment, and I'll leave that to because I assume that's Indian context in particular. So I'll leave that to Mishi or someone, to an expert in Indian law. But one thing, and this is something that um, people have been talking about for a while, is focusing your regulation on deleting content. Almost always ends badly and gets misused. So I think a lot of people who, and I focused on this in my last job before I came to Wikipedia as well, we tend to encourage regulators to focus on the business model and what aspects of the business model are incentivizing the spread of inflammatory disinformation, or what aspects of the business model are incentivizing the company to allow disinformation to spread because it's good for them commercially. And think about what checks and breaks and accountabilities you can place on the business model before you start kind of creating content takedown requirements, right? Like, have you fully exhausted, addressing the harms caused by the business model? And generally, politically, that is harder because there are commercial lobbies that don't want their business model interrogated, and politically it feels more convenient to just go after the content and require takedowns. But from a free speech standpoint, the chances that such regulations will be abused to silence critics of the powerful are, almost 100% in pretty much all contexts. So that's a challenge.
Truly. So thank you so much, Rebecca. Thank you for taking your time out today. We are so glad to have you here and to have this
Thank you.
important conversation. Thank you.
It's an honor. I'm a huge fan of your organization and the work you do. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind words. Thank
Thank
you.
you.